So did you do any moose tipping?
No, they really advise against that.
Yeah, but they're really tall, so you have that mechanical advantage. All right, you ready? Here we go. Today is Sunday, June 14th, 2015, and this is episode 119 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, freshly back from the Arctic North, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Hey, Jerry. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Congratulations, and welcome back.
Thanks. I hugged a polar bear, as you asked me to.
Great.
Oddly enough, though, it was a stuffed polar bear. But I did it.
Well, that's the thought that counts. I mean, you mission accomplished, right?
I will say it was a phenomenal trip. Saw a lot of amazing things. I'll be posting videos and pictures, and people can find them on my Flickr page and YouTube page and all that kind of jazz if you're curious. I don't want to eat up a bunch of showtime, but if you have an interest, Alaska is phenomenal. We took a cruise and a land tour. I will tell you that cruise and land tour is primarily peopled by senior citizens and people from Southeast Asia, oddly enough. Very few sort of middle-aged Americans were on that trip.
So you fit right in then, huh?
Well, no, they were fine. I just, it's just interesting. I guess that's who the demographic is, who has the time and the money to go.
Right.
Best I can tell.
Yeah.
So, but it was good times. We saw a lot of amazing things, and Alaska is an amazing state, and definitely a life-changing trip. Though 2 weeks is a long time to be away, so I apologize to our faithful listeners that we left hanging for 2 weeks, but I appreciate your patience as I went off and, had a nice little trip.
Yep. And, well, like I said, glad you're back. I had intended to record a podcast last weekend. However, my hound, which I've spoken about a lot, got very sick and occupied all of my time for the weekend. So,
Wait, how is she now?
She's doing much better. She is back to biting everyone. So, yes, that's good. It's all good. She's great. Thanks for asking.
It's scary, though. It's very scary when our pets are.
It is.
Yeah,
So
our cat, when we got home, was incredibly clingy for about 24 hours.
yeah, I can imagine. 2 weeks is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Go without your people. So, anyhow, just a reminder, the thoughts and opinions we express on this podcast are ours and do not represent those of our employer. And with that, we will get into our stories and try to get this show back on the rails. So first up is a really interesting story about something that I find particularly fascinating related to cyber insurance. And it comes from the Register. The title is Insurer Tells Hospitals, You Let Hackers In, We're Not Bailing You Out. And the story here is that an insurance company called Columbia Casualty had covered the losses, I guess it was about $4.1 million, from one of their insured customers called Cottage Healthcare. Cottage was breached, and I'm going to use air quotes around breached, right? And incurred about $4.1 million in losses from, I guess, lawsuit and probably credit monitoring and who knows what else. However, I don't exactly know, and it's not very clear in the article how this transpired, but apparently it came to be known that the way Cottage was breached is that their data was accessible from a public FTP site, which was crawled by Google and allowed an anonymous access.
That's awesome.
And so the insurer basically said, we're coming for our money. So they filed a suit to recoup their money. And apparently the Department of Justice, and by the way, normally in the HIPAA land, It's the Department of Health and Human Services in the Office of Civil Rights, OCR, that does all of their the hoopla around HIPAA. When the Department of Justice gets involved, as it apparently is now, that's not a good thing. And apparently the Department of Justice is in fact investigating Cottage, and in grand fashion, the Cottage Health Insurance says that they expect their insured to pick up the tab for any fines that result from any HIPAA-related action that the Department of Justice levies against them. So, wow, talk about kind of clueless.
Well, it's interesting, too, that there's a couple of things that come to mind. First, cyber insurance is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, obviously. And I think what we speculated on and what we're starting to see is that there's some level of due care that is being expected by these insurance companies. But that's not really defined, as far as I know. I mean, it's sort of in the policy as, big flowery language. But, hey, let's say you're a CISO. You're probably used to a prescriptive level of compliance that you can be audited against and measured against and know you're going to be okay. I don't see that happening yet with insurance companies, but I bet it's coming. And what that standard is going to be, don't know.
Yeah.
But, these people who are speculating, hey, for the heck of it, just get rid of your IT security department and buy insurance. Well, that's not going to work.
No.
Because they're expecting you to have some level of sanity around your IT security.
Yeah, and in fact, the article says here that among the allegations, Columbia says that Cottage failed to check for and apply security patches within 30 days of release, which, by the way, seems very specific. Not that I disagree that patches should be applied within 30 days, but that's a very specific timeline. Replace default access settings on security devices, undergo annual security audits, and outsource data to firms with poor security. Cottage is also accused of failing to provide adequate detection and tracking of changes to its network and data. So, I think it would be interesting to know what's in the contract or in the policy between Columbia and Cottage to see if any of this stuff is enumerated or if it's if it's expected as some kind of a due care clause. We don't really know.
Yeah, the only thing that the article states is Columbia agrees that it is not liable for the payout because Cottage did not provide adequate security for its documents, a clause the California Hospital Network agreed to when it signed the insurance policy.
There you go.
So that's... Now, what does provide adequate security mean?
That's the question.
And that's where I think we're probably going to see over the next couple of years a lot of back and forth on that.
Mm-hmm.
And my guess is eventually we're probably going to come up with another standard, whether we like it or not, another compliance standard to meet.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, just to take a little slight diversion, I will not be surprised to see if, in some way, shape, or form, the recent NIST framework is used for that. And anybody who knows anything about the framework knows that it's super squishy and could not be in any way, shape, or form used for that purpose now. But I think what we're going to see over time is that become kind of the de facto way that business arrangements specify different levels of requirements. So it's kind of an enumeration of different control domains with what your expectations are for each domain. And my anticipation is that we're going to start seeing both regulators and companies like insurance agencies making, kind of using that as a platform. So anyway, I'm hypothesizing, but we'll see. That's just kind of given my view of the world. That's where I see that going.
Yeah, I would agree. I wonder, too, if the insurance companies are now going to start asking for an approved audit by an approved insurance company vendor, right? We approve these 18 pen testers. If you want our insurance, you've got to get a pen test annually and show that you're remediating what the pen tester finds, kind of thing. Or
Right.
I can see a lot more rigor coming from the insurance industry going forward than simply, hey, we'll provide you insurance, pay your premiums.
So we can draw. I think we can draw a lot of similarities from, at least here in the U.S., auto insurance, and so, for instance, auto insurance here in the U.S. gives a discount if you take a lot of them do, not all of them. If you take defensive driving classes, right? So I'm wondering if at some point we start seeing insurance companies, or at least some kind of cottage industry, not to make fun of the name cottage, but an industry build up where kind of build up around the concept of helping companies understand how to do information security quote right, so they can get a discount on their premiums. Another one that I've really started to think a lot about is the whole stupid snapshot thing. So here if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, here in the U.S., a company called Geico, it's a big insurance company here. They offer a discount. I guess I assume it's a big discount. I don't really know. If you plug in a little device into your ODBT2 port, damn it, I'm going to say that right sooner or later. But anyway, you plug this little device into the port, and it, I guess, does things like record your speed. It's got I think it has a GPS transponder and other related things that gives some kind of attestation as to what kind of driver you are and what kind of risk you are. And I wonder if we're going to eventually see some kind of similar concept in the the cyber world, because at the end of the day, the insurance companies kind of want to know what sort of risk they're taking on, and it's very opaque in other ways. The other thing I've been wondering about, and this is kind of spurred on by the Department of Homeland Security, I fully don't have my head wrapped around their announcement of, I think it was Mandiant's product, where they provided some certification around a Mandiant product. Anyway, I'm wondering if we're going to see insurance companies, more or less, quote, certifying different security technology.
Maybe, but the one thing that I would argue is that it's not the technology so much as just the proper administration and use of that technology. And how do you audit that? How do you put some risk around each individual company's business decisions around risk tolerance?
The snapshot.
This is a really, really, really difficult problem that I think the insurance companies are going to really struggle to get their arms around.
Yeah, no. One thing I know this is becoming all about insurance, but I do know that there is a company or a couple of companies, one of which is BitSight, and they do some interesting data analysis or data gathering for insurance companies. And I guess you can also use it if you're a company who's outsourcing different things, different IT related stuff. You can go to BitSight and they will help identify, quote, the risk of this counterparty you're looking to engage with. And I guess what they're doing is looking for the IP space of this company in question being found participating in botnets and other things that kind of point to the hygiene of that company. So obviously it's not a comprehensive thing, but I think it's the point is it's a marker, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think this is the last time we're going to see this, and I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now the InfoSec insurance market's going to look very different.
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, moving on to our next story, which comes from Ars Technica, and the title is Report: Hack of Government Employee Records Discovered by Product Demo. So it was really difficult for me to pick which particular story we were going to cover related to this, but the Office of Personnel Management breach, other than the Kaspersky thing, was certainly the big news of the week. So the Office of Personnel Management is kind of the HR, human resources organization for the U.S. government, and they were breached. Now, I think that the aftermath is maybe something that people can look at and figure out how not to do, the public relations right on. Because there's just a ton of misinformation. Well, I don't necessarily know this misinformation, but there's a ton of speculation and hypothesizing. And, for instance, I think that a lot of the data that's swirling around about what may have been released is actually coming from the union president, the president of the Government Workers Union. I'm sure it has a name, and I just don't know it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Apparently, the point of this particular story is that this breach was in fact found by a product demo. So I guess in some other stories there were allegations that the GAO had found some, I guess not great track record of security at the OPM, and so the OPM was looking to up their game and had a company called Cytech out giving a demo of their product called Cypher. I haven't really heard of that one yet, but anyhow, apparently in the process of that demo, they actually found evidence of this malware embedded in their cybers, and here we are. So I guess that was discovered back in April, and it was disclosed, I think, on June 4th, if I'm not mistaken. So there was a lot of noise about that, but I think, in fact, that's how the RSA breach was disclosed back a couple years ago, or discovered a couple years back. I'm trying to remember. Was it NetWitness?
Oh, you are correct. You are tickling some brain cells. I would have to go back and do some research. I cannot remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't think this is necessarily super uncommon. I myself, when I was running IT at a company, we had someone come in, and you always find crap, right? Ours was more misbehavior by certain employees than anything like this. But I think it kind of points out that there's tools out there, if properly leveraged, would find stuff that we're not finding now.
Well, you got to know the sales guys for Cytech were high-fiving after this one.
Oh, heck yeah. I assume so. I mean, I do wonder if they ended up getting any money out of it.
That is a good question. I bet they're the ones, actually, excuse me, and I have no way of verifying this, but I bet they were the ones who leaked the info to, was it the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah.
That it was found by a product demo.
Yeah, so maybe that's why it got leaked.
Well, OPM didn't say that initially. It was a third party.
Right.
So my gut, from what I know about salespeople and IT security organizations, some VP somewhere said, "Give this to the press." I have no knowledge of that. I can't confirm that. I'm just speculating.
Total hypothesis. So yeah, we'll understand more, I think, as time goes on about exactly what happened. There's a ton of speculation going on about what exactly was breached, and one of the really nightmare scenarios is that the questionnaire people fill out to obtain I think it's a 127-page, if I read that right, it's a 127-page questionnaire for obtaining your security clearance. And there's some allegations that maybe all of the people who have security clearance had their information stolen. And of course, this was perpetrated by none other than, you guessed it, China. And by the way, I gotta say, if it is China, that makes a lot of sense, because you gotta be thinking they must have a pretty damn good graph of, assuming it is China, right? Behind a lot of these breaches, they've got to have a pretty good graph of the relationship between people and whatnot. That's kind of scary if in fact it is true. But I actually wrote something up about how we like certainty. We like people to claim attribution. So anyhow, as we learn more, we'll circle back to this one. We don't yet know how it happened, but I'm going to put my money on a phishing email.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Seems like a safe bet.
That's right. That's right.
I wonder if at this point, if China actually has a better grasp on our population than we do from all the databases they supposedly have hacked.
We should just outsource our census to China.
Some of the nightmare scenarios being talked about is all sorts of active CIA with code names, and some of the stuff that people are talking about is theorizing could be in here is huge implications, but none of it's confirmed yet. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's a much more pressing problem, because I guess there's another allegation, which we're not really prepared to talk about, that the Snowden documents were decrypted by Russia and China, and so you got the British government and I guess the U.S. government, again, allegedly performing rescue missions to extract their agents. So
it's possible.
Yeah.
In theory, Snowden was trying to be selective, right? In theory, of things that weren't too damaging to individuals, like well-placed sources and that sort of thing. But if he's lost control of the documents,
yep, that's right.
Who knows?
That's right. So moving on to the next story. This one actually came as a request, and I guess it was about a week and a half or so ago. This thing flares up every now and then. So the U.S. signed an update to the Wassenaar Agreement. And the Wassenaar Agreement is it's a treaty that controls the export of certain types of military wares. And so this particular update that they signed, as I understand it, at least I haven't actually read the specific update, but as I understand it, the updates includes some specificity around the control of cyber security related technology. And so the implication there is that certain kinds of hacking tools are now going to fall into the export control program of the U.S. And so that's creating quite a lot of consternation. I know a couple of months ago there was a big flap when Metasploit became ENC restricted, which basically, by the way, means that the selling company has to publish to the government a list of who they've exported it to, and then there's some limitations on who they are allowed to export to. So they're, for instance, not allowed to export to unfriendly governments. Beyond that, there's relatively few restrictions. But the interesting thing is that, as far as I know, it doesn't actually restrict open source technology. So if you're going to publish something publicly, it doesn't actually change anything. Now, what I've got here in the show notes is a link to a Reddit post, somebody who is obviously very familiar with U.S. export law. I'm unfortunately somewhat familiar with it. I kind of ran into it a little bit, and this guy gets it does a very nice job of describing it. I'm also going to include an FAQ from the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is the group in the government that actually runs the export control program. So the FAQ, I think, gives a lot of clarity about what they're actually doing. And so I wanted to just talk about that for a second. So specifically what's at issue here is what they're calling intrusion software. And that has an interesting definition. So they're going to limit the tooling that can produce, deliver, or manage communication to what they call intrusion software. So I would think about things like, Metasploit and Core, and I would imagine things like the back-end control panel of the Zeus bot would be controlled, among other things. What's not being controlled is exploit code, for a specific exploit. A discussion about or the tooling to create exploits would be controlled, or to discover new exploits would be controlled. So I think it kind of is potentially concerning, but I don't think that this is going to end up changing anything that's in the open source community. It's really going to be a big problem for companies like Core and Rapid7 and others who create tooling, commercial tooling like that. But I'm not convinced that those aren't already being regulated. I suspect that this is really just going to be kind of a torquing down on people who are already controlled. So, the big difference with this new Wassenaar treaty is that when a company wants to export something in this definition, they're going to have to get permission every single time. There's not going to be any openness, right? They're not going to get the ability to just provide a biannual report. They're actually going to have to go and get permission every single time. So that's, I think, going to be a big burden on those companies. I'm not convinced that it's going to be a big impact on individual people, but could be wrong. That's why we have lawyers.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks in the exploit research community who are fearing that this may, in essence, criminalize their research.
I don't think so. There was a great. I want to find this FAQ. Give me 1 second here. Yes. So in the FAQs, it's question number 7. Will companies be required to share their 0-day exploits with the government in order to get a license? Which is obviously kind of a question with some consternation behind it. And I would say that the answer, they kind of say yes. In fact, yes, you may very well be required to provide your 0-day exploit to the government. So there. How do you like those apples?
Well, we've gone through this a number of times over the years. It's never really worked out all that well. This has never really been a positive thing for anyone trying to control this sort of thing. So, we went through this originally with the launch of PGP back in the
crypto
late
wars.
80s.
Yeah, the crypto wars.
I lost some good friends in the crypto wars, and I don't know. It's governments want to control things they think are dangerous.
Yeah,
this rarely ever ends well for the government or for the companies trying to. It's the companies trying to do right who end up really getting hurt by this because they get this onerous burden of regulation on them, while a lot of other companies say the hell with it and move overseas or put out open source or
right.
Or it stifles innovation.
Yeah, I would imagine this is not a great time in the history of the United States to look for for ways to stifle our IT. Given everything that's gone on, we're already at a disadvantage because of the Snowden disclosures and all of that related stuff. It's not an awesome time for this kind of thing. At the same time, though, we know that the U.S. government has a long history and tradition of not wanting other governments and foreign nationals to obtain the benefit of U.S. derived technology that could in turn be used to harm us. And so I think now this is, that's sort of thing's been in place for a very long time with respect to kinetic weapons. And now it's really being extended into the digital space. There was one other thing that I didn't define intrusion software, and I thought their definition of intrusion software, which is also part of what's being controlled, is kind of odd. So they take great pains in this FAQ, they being the Bureau of Industry and Security, take great pains to point out that normal malware is not going to be to fall into the category of something that's going to be controlled. It's really this thing called intrusion software, and they define it like this. The definition specifies only intrusion software that is capable of extracting or modifying data or modifying the standard execution path of software in order to allow the execution of externally provided instructions. Thus, technology for the development of malware that is designed to do other things, such as damage or destroy systems or infrastructure, would not be controlled under this proposed rule. So we should all feel much better given that definition. So, as I understand it, the BIS has a request for comment. I think there's a link on their website. I think it's bis.doc.gov. You can, I'm sure, find it and let them know what you think. But I'm with you. I don't think this is a great thing for us.
Yeah, you've pretty much covered everything that I would comment on. So our last story for tonight is the big bombshell dropped by Kaspersky, who has a long history of dropping big bombshells about APT groups. So last week, Kaspersky disclosed the discovery of Duqu 2.0. I don't know why they didn't call it NG, but, well, whatever. So this is apparently another allegedly hacking campaign, state-sponsored hacking campaign, that apparently leverages some of the code that was used in Duqu and Stuxnet. It's apparently an extremely complicated and very large piece of software, which actually Kaspersky found in their own systems. So they didn't have to go looking in Iranian uranium processing centers. They found this on their own systems. Apparently, one of their employees was testing some new product and found some concerning data flows. And upon investigation, they found, quote, a few dozen systems that were infected. Apparently, Patient Zero was one of their Asia Pacific employees' workstations. They suppose, or they suspect, that the original attack came in as a spear phishing email. They don't exactly know right now, because apparently as Kaspersky were getting close to identifying Patient Zero, about 4 hours ahead of that, whoever this adversary was wiped the browser history and the email box of the employee. So Kaspersky says they have backups of all that stuff, so they'll eventually figure it out. But they are saying that this is apparently not just impacting Kaspersky, but also after they shared it with the sample with Symantec found a number of other organizations that were infected.
including some hotels and other related things that were being used to host the Iranian, the UN Security Council Iranian nuclear negotiations. So, kind of interesting. There's a technical write-up by Kaspersky. I don't think there's anything in particular that is, necessarily worth dwelling on, except that this is another example, I think, where the overall industry of malware now has a new minimum bar, right? So now the creativity of malware authors everywhere has been spurred. So I just think that this is, assuming this is in fact a government sponsored attack, it ends up hurting all of us, and I'm a little frustrated by that. But it is what it is. And apparently, allegedly, the attacker, of course, is either Israel or the U.S. or both. So there.
Clearly, it must be Israel, the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, who else could it be, right? I'm sure it had an Eastern time zone, and a U.S. English character set, and it may have even used some of the same source code in previous campaigns. So I mean, what more could you possibly? That's, you just can't fake that stuff, right?
So if you take everything Kaspersky said at face value, right, and that is a big if, that they do have a motive to make money here. This is a pretty interesting campaign, and it is, in theory, looking to be targeting some very nation-state level stuff. So, as opposed to a lot of the attacks that are just immediately attributed to China, at least the motivations appear to be more in line with some sort of true espionage type activity. The other thing this brings up is it's great that they found something that their other tools couldn't find, but it makes me wonder what else could have been done to find and prevent this than, Kaspersky's new wonder technology. And, are we just again going to continue to have this arms race where now we've got, in theory, some of the leading bad guys going after those building the anti-malware tools directly to figure out what's in the next version and how they're testing, as opposed to just waiting for it to come out and buying a copy and testing against it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an ugly development. But it's not inconceivable for, And I will tell you, having worked for a lot of IT security companies, often the internal IT security for the IT security companies is not as solid as you would think it would be.
It's the cobbler's children problem. Yeah. Yep.
And you often have, as we see here, the developers using their own internal environment as their QA environment in their test lab, which makes sense if you're a developer. It drives you crazy if you're IT.
Yeah, I guess in the end analysis, I guess it kind of worked out for them. But it's I guess it just kind of points out that I guess I'm a little frustrated here because there's an allegation that this is super advanced, and I think everybody, what's emerging to me is that the definition of advanced and sophisticated means that it's not detected by IPS or antivirus, and but almost everything falls into that category now, and so now you have this company who manufactures that stuff, who fell victim to it as well, and to their credit, it was in fact, not, it was a little novel, but Dave Kennedy has been talking about malware that resides in memory for 3 years now.
So look at it from this standpoint as a possibility. If they build antivirus technology that they believe in strongly, and they're listening to their own marketing, how much third-party software would they additionally be running on top of this gear, right? If they really truly believe in their anti-malware, which they probably do, because they sell it and build it, and they have their own echo chamber. If that's the only thing they're relying upon, as they tell their customers, most likely, they might not be running anything else.
Yeah, well, that's that. I mean, that's. I think that's hard to argue with. I would be very surprised to find out that. I mean, I run into that problem too, even to this day. No one wants to invest in your competitor's product, right? It's just a fundamental reality of business, and I think that's going to be true no matter what industry you're in, no matter who you are. I would imagine Symantec isn't buying Kaspersky or Bit9 or anything like that because they are Symantec.
Aside from competitive intelligence reasons.
Right. But
Yeah.
but for the purposes of protecting their environment, they, I'm sure, are using Symantec. So
I agree with you. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is they use your favorite technique, which is to go after the domain controllers.
yeah, I continue to go into a dark place about Active Directory. It just is it is the backbone of almost every advanced, and I use the term advanced in quotes, and widespread attack on companies. That I can't think of any, in fact, that did not involve Active Directory.
Yeah.
Not saying that it couldn't happen. I guess I think that it might be maybe not economical to go after companies that don't have Active Directory. I don't know.
Well, the other thing that I find interesting about this story is they talk about, as they started doing the forensics analysis and the investigation, they found plenty of log evidence of this various lateral movement and hopscotching and such. So it makes me wonder, going back to the signal and the noise, it's very, very, very easy to see the pattern in retrospect when you know what to look for. It's a lot harder to find it when you don't know what you look for. But was there something we could be doing here from a log analysis standpoint that would have more readily caught this activity? Because they found the logs in retrospect.
Yeah, they did. I think that this is a really big problem because you have, and I will predict that in a week or two's time, you're going to see 3 or 4 different security vendors out there running webinars showing how their product catches,
of course,
this thing. But then they never answer the question. Well, what else does it catch? Is it constantly going off? Because so I think that's the big problem, and I don't think we really have enough enough data to know the answer to that. Although I will tell you that there may be some opportunity here given one of the attributes that they were funneling all of the command and control traffic through one system. And I'm going to guess, by the way, that system was this person's workstation.
Could be. That's an interesting technique because you would think if all traffic coming from one box would be a bigger anomaly than lots of little traffic coming from many boxes.
Yes.
But it depends, right? I don't know their environment. But if I'm looking at anomaly detection, I'd want to, in theory, spread that code out over a lot of machines. But at the same time, we're assuming they've got anomaly detection running, which they probably don't, and we're assuming that they were looking for big spikes in traffic. We don't know how this was configured. So, I don't know. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that most of our big data breach reports, like Verizon's and Microsoft's, all point out that 90+% of active attacks are going after known vulnerabilities that were patched many months before the attack.
Right.
And which seems to indicate, okay, the vast majority of folks can help themselves by keeping current on patching. However, in this attack, if Kaspersky is to be completely believed, 3 non-patch vulnerabilities were utilized.
Yeah,
which is a big deal. That's burning a lot of O days for this attack.
It is. That's been discussed a lot, and I'm not sure that I buy how much I buy into the argument that, well, they burn ODay. Well, that kind of presumes that they don't have a lot of ODay, to work with.
That's true.
So, we don't know. We don't know if is it 3 out of 10 or is it 3 out of 5,000. We don't know. But the other thing is that they were supposing that the person, at least one of the ODays used, was to compromise this person's workstation, which was, quote, fully patched and up to date. And however, we all know that you don't need an ODay to compromise the workstation. All you need is a compelling excuse for someone to click on an attachment.
Sure.
That's it. You don't need an ODay.
And given that this is a development code house, most likely they had full admin rights on their box.
Of course. Why would they not? That's crazy. And now, having said that, we don't have any idea.
Right. We're completely speculating here. Let's be clear on that.
Yeah, but by the way, you don't need admin rights, right? I mean, I can install malware on a system just fine without admin rights. It runs in the context of the user, right? But I can make it start up every time that person logs in. If my end game is hitting a domain controller, I can still hit the domain controller. I can't get local system account, but do I really need it if that workstation is not my end game? So, I guess my point is don't think that admin rights is necessarily the end all be all, but where apparently they do have some potential interesting opportunity for an ODay, assuming it wasn't a pass the hash attack, by the way, is that apparently they saw some attacks which lead them to believe the attackers were exploiting Kerberos, some Kerberos flaw on the domain controllers. Although I will tell you, just personal experience says it's far more likely that they got cache credentials. But hey, I don't know. Wasn't there, didn't see it. Don't really know. But anyway, one of the novel things about this, as I mentioned a little bit ago, is apparently the attackers, their malware strategy here was to not actually, on the domain controllers, to not actually have code running. So they it all actually ran in memory. And
so it's running, it just doesn't have anything on disk.
Correct. And the implication there is if the system gets shut down or rebooted, it's not infected anymore. But the way they handled that was the system, which again I think was probably their workstation, when the domain controller came back up and it wasn't infected anymore, the workstation reinfected it and back off to the races. So beyond that, it's very opaque as to exactly what happened. Kaspersky, if they know what data was stolen, they're not saying. So we don't really know how deep they got into the network. I kind of hope that a security company doesn't solely rely on technology, and in fact they actually rely on architectural design elements to help protect themselves, but don't really have any clue on whether that was the case or not. So maybe more to come, maybe not. Don't really know. Kind of interesting that they came out like this. Although, kind of expect to see maybe some other security companies doing the Me Too thing. I don't know. If you're not getting hacked, are you really that good?
It's interesting. I mean, we're starting to get into sort of the scenarios that any malware vendors were trying to push 10 years ago. We're actually starting to see them now. Yeah,
absolutely. So, anyhow, anything else you wanted to say about this one?
No. I'll be honest. I'm a little out of the loop. I just got back from 2 weeks off, and so I don't have a ton to contribute. But by next show, I'll be back up to speed.
Awesome. Well, welcome back. And I guess we will talk again next week. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Sorry for our 2-week absence. And I think we'll be back to a normal cadence going forward. So thanks again. Talk again next week. And by the way, you can find the podcast on the web at www.defensivesecurity.org, where you can find links to the stories we talked about, as well as back episodes and whatnot. If you really like the show and you want to help support us, you can go to our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/defensivesec. And by the way, thank you so much to those people who have donated already. I'm truly honored by the generosity of people. And in fact, Mr. Khaled and I are working on a potentially something to say thank you to those people. So more to come on that later.
I promise you, it's nothing inappropriate.
No, actually, it's very cool.
Jerry's first couple of ideas were just not cool at all. But this idea, we think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not inflatable this time. So anyway, you can follow Mr. Khaled on Twitter at Lurg. You can follow me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. And with that, I guess we'll talk again next week.
Have a great week, everybody.
Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.